Okay, so after I've reviewed the Moto G6 a few days ago, now it's time for the G6 Plus and maybe tomorrow for the Play. So let's jump straight into it, and it's obvious they all look pretty much the same, even though I don't quite understand one thing. The Moto G6 Plus 5.9 display with 2x1 and the G6 5.7-inch display with 2x1, and look of how much bigger the Plus is. More than it actually should, in my opinion, because it feels like a noticeably bigger phone, even though the display isn't. And the great thing about the G6 was that it felt very dense, with a great premium heft and quite compact. This kinda gets lost here, because this one actually feels almost a little bit too light for its size, and therefore kinda loses its premium heft. And then it just doesn't look quite as compact anymore, with those quite big bezels and all around a little bit more chunky aesthetics. That's the one thing, because build quality hasn't changed. It still feels very solid, a little bit normally hollow on the back, just not quite as good as the G6 did, or for example even the X4. But buttons, great tactile feedback, good position. Of course, what I also like is that we have this nice curve on the back, which makes the phone actually feel at least a little bit narrower than it is. And then, of course, one-hand usability won't be all that great since it's quite a tall phone. That's one thing that I just don't quite get. Why do we have a 2x1 display if we still have pretty much the same amount of bezels on all sides, actually even wider on the sides, which makes the phone just feel very big for what it is. But let's stop complaining and check the back here. As you can see, the camera does noticeably protrude. That's kind of the signature, but I have no problem at all with that, because yes, it does wobble a little bit, but due to the quite big part here in the middle, it usually stays actually quite solid. Now, what we have here is dual SIM and SD card tray. That's something you don't really get all that often. It's nice. Then, of course, the microphone, nothing on the left. On the bottom, USB Type-C, headphone jack, and no notification LED. I know, huge bummer. For me personally, the Moto display is more than just a good replacement, but not for everyone. And yeah, it does usually always turn on, but that's just due to the camera. Selfie cam, obviously. Then the fingerprint reader that looks a little bit squeezed into here. So it feels like it's smaller than it actually should have been just because of the logo. But I can tell you that it works very reliable. Never had any issues. Of course, front, you either like it or you don't like it. And the screen could turn on a little bit faster, so it's not a fast one overall, but very, very reliable. Like I already said, bezels on all sides quite big, even though we have a flat front. Yep. All good in that aspect, can't really complain. You could obviously also use the fingerprint reader for your navigation instead of the on-screen buttons, but personally I don't think that's quite as convenient. So let's get into the display, not to the battery. And here we'll see the color mode, and I definitely like one thing, that I can change between standard and vibrant and still change the color temperature. What I would have personally liked to have seen is actually even a more vibrant mode, because standard in my opinion just looks too pale, and vibrant is what many people will like, but some people, especially the ones who use AMOLED displays, would maybe want a little bit more saturation even so. So in case. Other than that, I measured 650 lux of brightness, which almost seems too much. For some reason, I think my lux meter measures a little bit too much, because it is an absolutely nice enough bright display. Viewing angles are stable, normal, absolutely. And the color look super nice. So it is a very good display. It's not on the level of an X4. The X4 for me is still at that price range, kinda unbeatable, and a beautiful display, but this one is absolutely more than you would should expect from this price. Now, the speaker. Now, it's still a front-firing mono speaker on the left, or depending on how you see it, or on the top, but it sounds at least noticeably better compared to the G6, because there it was just too harsh, and even though it was loud, it was a little bit too much for the ears. This kind of harshness is gone. It's still very loud. So this is an absolutely nice speaker. No problems at all. It still feels a little bit weird where the sound is coming from because of the usual position, but totally nice. Now the headphone jack, which is at the bottom, is not all that great. It could be noticeably louder. Okay, we have Dolby Audio, something I think forgot to talk about in the G6 review, but it doesn't really make much of a change. You definitely have to enable it if you want the better sound this time, for example, than on the G6 Play, where it's not necessary. But you can change it, of course, and that's something good, but it could be noticeably louder. The quality itself, though, is absolutely nice, but for normal in-ears, it should still be fine. Now, in terms of performance, let's kill them all, at least here in the recent apps, and let's check how quickly they launch. And I have to say, I actually expected a little bit of a bigger gap between the 450 of the G6 and this one here. Because yes, the 450 is a kind of slower 625, but the 625, I actually almost said a few times, it is better than the 630, because even though they run both very smooth, and the 630 sometimes can be smoother, the 625 back then was a little bit more lag free. And this is something that I actually noticed. The 450 on the G6 has a little bit less lag. It's still top because Moto really knows to optimize their phones, and it is as lag free, and it is better than it was on the X4 back then. I guess the X4 got better as well. So performance, don't get me wrong, is great. And the reason why I gave it 4 stars, unlike I usually give 4.5, is just because I changed my whole rating system like half a star down just to incorporate the Snapdragon 660 and maybe 636, because they definitely need a place between it. So I'm super happy with the performance. For everyday normal tasks, it's fine. Multitasking works fine. It's not crazy fast, it's not crazy super smooth, because after all, this is not a flagship, but for what it is, absolutely nice. Gaming performance also just about the same as well. It doesn't really heat up so much because the 630 is very efficient. So let's get into the battery life. A full charge I would expect to take about 1 hour and 40. I didn't really measure it, but since the G6 has a little bit of a smaller battery, needed like 1 hour 45. That should be still the same here. And the battery life is also a little bit better than on the G6, with about 6 hours on average on mobile data, and like maybe 9 to maybe even possible 10 hours on mobile data and on Wi-Fi. The only thing that I've noticed is that for some reason here, the standby range seems a little bit, not by much, but a little bit, and it is noticeable worse compared to other phones with their chipset and so much. So that's the one thing that I was a little bit disappointed by, because with a better standby range, I would actually say this is possibly for some people a 2-day phone. With that standby range, it could get a little bit tight, but still overall super nice. Now software, I actually don't want to talk about it because it's the same as it usually is on Moto. You could just check that review, but just okay, real quick. We have an app drawer, obviously. We have quick settings. We don't have a theming engine, would have been nice, but Moto just doesn't do that, because what we get from Moto is the Moto app or the Moto suite. Actually didn't really set it up, because we have the nice little gestures that I like, for example, for the flashlight, also for the camera and such. So you have a few options, like for example making the screen smaller. Not a whole lot of adjustments, which could lead to updates coming in further, or I mean quicker, if that's really the case. Not quite so much from Moto side what I've seen, but usually I like the UI. It's clean, it's very well optimized, it has all the essential options, not really much more, but that's it. So let's talk about the camera, and I'm gonna just skip the camera app because it's the exact same as on the G6. So let's just go into the camera, and here we can see the selfie cam. And obviously from this kind of range, it's a little bit not quite yet in focus, but from here it's fine. And the colors look quite natural. Also the sharpness looks fine. Exposure seems good. So all very solid for a cam of this price range. There are better ones, maybe even at that price, but usually not. So this is just about in line what you should expect. So fully pleased. Also indoors, as you can see here. For low light, there is a flash, as you can see. This is what the change does. Yeah, it's nice to have the option, I would say. Now, low light capabilities, as you can see here, with the flash and without, are absolutely okay. All good here as well. So outside, you can see that the sharpness is actually good, and we had a very nice, very precise actually focus. Sometimes it was out of focus, but usually it did really well, especially here with some kind of back or light from the other side. Nice photos, absolutely. This, for this price range, is what you should expect. You can't really get much more usually at this price range. Actually, this is a little bit above already about that, because very consistent. I got usually always good pictures, not mind-blowing good ones, but totally solid and more than a capable shooter. So even here I am fully pleased, especially here, for example, the details mostly stay intact, especially here, as you can see. So yeah, I'm good. Now the bokeh mode, yeah, not that great, but yep. Other than that, here are a few more low light pics, for example, I used in just normal situations, also on Instagram visible, yep. And here are a few more low light pics where it absolutely knows to deliver on a solid level. Now let's talk about video here. 4K is there, it's not stabilized. There is a little bit of artifacting going on, which is absolutely normal, but once there is not too much movement going on, especially with the good autofocus, you get really clean quality. Because if you have a halfway steady hand, as you can see here, I don't think shaking should be an issue, because you get 1080p 30 and EIS but 1080p and EIS doesn't really deliver the better quality. So I would definitely stick with 4K. As you can see here, very nice, sharp, totally nice cars and everything. So really pleased with that. What I'm absolutely not pleased with is 1080p. For some reason, I have not yet seen this with so many artifacts. So it loses so much quality and still doesn't even add EIS. So I'm just gonna skip that because I was disappointed by the artifacts. So just stick with 4K. If you want 1080p, like for example here with the really nice EIS, which almost seems a little bit weird because it kind of looks like it's controlled with a controller with those harsh movements. But it is very smooth and it does it, but quality definitely does diminish. Now front facing cam, also absolutely solid job. There are better ones with more details because yeah, and some artifacting is going on, but usually the quality overall, as you can see here, totally passable. Absolutely. I've seen higher end cams that don't do it really much better. And then the last video here inside with an audio quality that I expected to be better. It is good, it is clean, but it could sound a little bit more richer, a little bit more high quality. And then once you can see here in low light, quality degrades obviously, but we have of course still the flash. And it improves. In some situations this could actually help quite a lot. The crop is also quite good. So yep, I would say let's just jump right into it. And the rating, and like I said, the 4 stars for the performance is just because I kinda took every phone half a step off, because all the ones that had usually 4.5 with a Snapdragon 625, 630 or so are all now down to 4, just because I had to squeeze in the 636 and 660 as a 4.5 to give room for the 835 and 845 for 5 stars. So overall, what's my opinion? Now the weird thing is that I expected the gap between the Moto G6 Plus and the Moto G6 to be bigger. But it's not like this is not as good, but just because the G6 is better than I expected and this is pretty much just what I expected, so that's why the gap is a little bit closer than I would have thought. But it is the overall better phone. The only thing that is actually, in my opinion, weaker would be that the design just feels noticeably bigger to what you get, because the screen, yes, a little bit better. The speaker also a little bit better just because not as harsh. The performance, though, actually normal use pretty much identical. Battery life a little bit better. The camera and overall a little bit better. So all those little bit better definitely make up for it for the €50 price difference that it usually comes with. Even though I still think that both are a little bit too expensive, but since they just came out right now, prices will fall down, so just wait a month or two and it will be fine. So I can definitely recommend both, but keep in mind the price, because if you pay a little bit more for some other ones, you can maybe sometimes get already something like Snapdragon 660 devices or something like that. So the good thing is that it doesn't really have any bigger downsides. It doesn't really have any flaws, no deal breakers, which is good. And the overall consistent general experience is absolutely good, because if I use this in normal life, absolutely, it does all I would need it to do. I don't know why they made it so much bigger. That's the only kind of thing that I've noticed. Once I make my rating now and check everything, all the aspects objectively, then I noticed that the G6 just feels so much nicer in the hand because it feels more compact. It's a little bit more premium and all that. Now what you should maybe also consider, though, with about the same price but with a smaller display, with not 2x1 but 16:9 still, which is maybe actually a thing that maybe people could like, is the Moto X4. What I think I will be doing is still a comparison between the G6, the G6 Plus and the X4, but a compact one, just so you know maybe which one you should get, because that one came out a little bit more expensive and has some other benefits which you should definitely check out, and it could be the better choice for you. But other than that, really nice phone, absolutely okay, and the most important part, well balanced without any bigger issues, even though maybe nothing is crazily outstanding, but for that price usually nothing can stand out without making any other bigger sacrifices. That's it. Until next time, bye.